Hey, if you're standing in front of a belt sander, a drill press, or a jigsaw and you're wondering whether you should add a power feeder to your workshop, I hear you. The last thing you want is to drop a few $100s on a piece of equipment that sits in the corner, gathers dust, or worse, causes more headaches than it solves. You're probably asking yourself, will this feeder actually keep my material moving smoothly, or will I end up fighting with it every time I start a cut? That's the exact question I'm trying to answer today, and I'll be honest, there's a lot that can go wrong if you pick the wrong tool. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about the kind of work this machine is built for. The Powermatic 3-roll power feeder is a 1 horsepower, 3-roller system that's meant to push sheet goods, think plywood, MDF, hardwood panels through a stationary cutter. It's a classic feed-your-saw setup that you would see in a professional cabinet shop or a serious hobbyist's garage. If you're cutting inch plywood and you need a consistent feed rate without having to push the board by hand, this is the kind of machine that can keep your hands free for other tasks and keep the cut straight. If, however, you're only cutting a few 24s a month, or you work exclusively with handheld Reuters, the feeder might be overkill. What sets the Powermatic apart from a cheaper, generic feed roller is its continuous duty motor and the way that power gets transferred through a gearbox into the feed rollers. In practical terms, that means the motor can run for long periods without overheating, a real concern if you're running a full day's worth of cuts. I've watched several woodworkers set up these feeders and run them for 3, 4, even 5 hours straight. The motor stays relatively cool, and the rollers keep turning at a steady pace. That's a clear advantage over the toy-like feeders that stall after a half hour and need to be cooled down. Another noteworthy design element is the universal joint and locking mechanism that lets you tilt the feeder horizontally, vertically, or at an angle. In a small shop, you'll often have to squeeze the feeder into a tight corner or line it up with a saw that isn't perfectly square. The ability to lock the feeder in place means the feed rollers won't wobble when the machine is under load. I saw a tutorial where someone was feeding 4 by 8 sheets at a 15-degree angle to accommodate a wall-mounted table saw. The feeder stayed rock solid, and the user reported no vibration that would otherwise cause the sheet to snag. The smart roller system is another practical bit. Instead of having to disassemble the whole feeder to replace a worn roller, you can pull the old tire out and slide a new one in. That design choice saves you time and money because roller wear is inevitable if you're feeding abrasive rated plywood or particle board. The rollers are integrated with a chain and sprocket that gives a positive feed. The material is gripped and moved forward, rather than just being nudged. For example, when feeding a 1x4 hardwood board, the system won't let the board slip back if the cut slows down due to a knot in the wood. It provides that gentle, consistent tug you need for a clean cut. Now, no product is perfect, so let's look at the weaknesses that matter when you actually start using this feeder. First, the weight. With its solid cast iron construction, the feeder weighs close to 150 pounds. That makes it a sturdy base, but it also means you'll need at least 2 people to move it around, or you'll have to invest in a set of rollers, or a forklift if your shop layout changes frequently. If you rent space or have a very limited area, that heft could be a logistical pain point. Second, the feeder's power comes from a standard 115-volt, single-phase line. Most residential workshops have that, but if you're in a more industrial setting that supplies 230-volt 3-phase, you'll need a step-down transformer, or a dedicated circuit. It's not a deal-breaker, but you'll have to factor that into your setup cost. Additionally, the 1 HP motor is generous for most sheet goods work, but if you ever try to feed very thick, dense material, say, a 2-inch hardwood board, some users report the feeder slowing down noticeably. It still feeds, but you'll lose some of the speed advantage the motor originally promised. Who should buy this? If you are a cabinet maker, a production woodworker, or even a serious DIYer who frequently cuts large panels on a stationary saw, the Powermatic feeder can be a real time saver. The continuous duty motor means you won't be constantly stopping to let the feeder cool, and the adjustable column lets you line up with a saw that isn't perfectly square. The positive feed rollers reduce the chance of material slipping, which translates directly into cleaner cuts and less rework. On the flip side,